Hi, I'm Katya, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a teacher using Gamestar mechanic in the classroom. A lot of teachers are worried because they're not gamers or they're not very tech savvy, and they're worried about teaching game design in the classroom and how they will be able to impart knowledge to their kids on a subject domain that they're not necessarily comfortable with. But that's actually okay in Gamestar. As a teacher using Gamestar mechanic in the classroom, it's not necessarily your job to help kids with the technical side of game making. In fact, Gamestar scaffolds kids into the game-making environment by way of a quest that teaches them how to use Gamestar to make their own games, and it also teaches them what a good game is made of. So your job as the teacher is actually to facilitate their learning process. This means you need to make sure that they think critically and creatively when they're designing a game, that they analyze the decisions that they make, they solve the problems in the game, they collaborate effectively with each other. This is all the good stuff we do in our classrooms to help kids learn whether they're designing games or not. So an effective way to do this in Gamestar and with any game design activity is to use what we call the iterative design process. So what is it? It's a process where kids design games, test them, and then iterate on their designs. So in Gamestar Mechanic, what does that look like? Well, in Gamestar, there are a couple places where kids design games. They can design games in the quest itself. There are areas in the quest where the player is required to design their own game in order to move on. The pedagogy in the quest scaffolds kids through the game design activities to help them use the tool in Gamestar, so by the time that they are designing their own games, they're comfortable with the tool. Kids can also design games in their workshop starting from a blank slate. In the workshop, there are also game design challenges where players design games according to prompts and parameters. In all of these environments where kids are designing games in Gamestar Mechanic, they'll be able to figure out the editor with the help of the quest and with the scaffolding in Gamestar itself. So after a kid decides one game, what usually happens is that they want to go right on to designing the next one, and that's where you come in. Where learning happens in the game design process is when a student reflects on the decisions they've made, tests out their game, and makes changes according to the feedback they get from their players. This is the iterative design process. So after your kids design games, you can set up playtest sessions. You can have your students collaborate on giving each other feedback on their games, helping them figure out what did their game do well, what kind of things they needed to change in the game. After students give each other feedback, this is the time to iterate on their design. This means that they go back into their games and solve the problems that came up during the playtest session. This kind of problem solving, collaboration, and responding to feedback are real-life and 21st century skills. So if you help your students go through the process of designing a game, testing it out, and iterating on their designs, then you are facilitating the iterative design process and helping them learn. You can do this without a lot of technical or game design knowledge, and we have even more resources to help you. At the bottom of any page in Gamestar Mechanic, there is a button that says Teachers. This brings you to the Gamestar Mechanic teacher site, and in the Teaching Resources, you'll find a button that says Learning Guide. In the Learning Guide, if I go into Online Learning Guide Resources, there is a title called Assessment. Here are two rubrics, one for assessing the game design process, talking about brainstorming, designing, playtesting, and iterating, like we just talked about, and the other assessing a game itself, talking about the elements in the game, the balance in the game, the text and the story in the game. These rubrics will help you and your students evaluate their own games and their own game design process. In the Learning Guide as well, we have over 50 lessons, and many of these lessons include designing and then playtesting and iterating on the designs. So with these Learning Guide resources, the rubrics for game assessment, and the knowledge that your kids are the ones who deal with the game design and tech side of Gamestar Mechanic, your job becomes the one of the facilitator, making sure that kids are learning as they design games using the iterative design process.